so much for joining me today. It is Wednesday, which means we are going over running back rankings. We're going to hit quarterback and kickers in a video later this afternoon to start to prep you guys for setting your lineups to crush your opponents this weekend. First things first, if you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out, enables me to continue to do what I love and bring you content that you love. So without further ado, let's get into this week's running back rankings. At number 1, it's Derrick Henry. The king remains on top. He is coming off of 3 straight finishes in the top 12. Within that span, he also is averaging 32 carries per game. He has 635 yards of total offense, 4 touchdowns, and is averaging 4.5 yards per carry. Did I mention he gets Jacksonville this week? In at number 2, it's Alvin Kamara. And at this point, guys, maybe we just have to realize that Washington's defense is just bad. They haven't been able to stop anyone. We keep thinking they're going to rebound, and they just gave up a 30-burger nearly to the Falcons. So, obviously, Alvin loves to see it, and the football team just made Cordero Patterson look like he was all-world. So this is going to be a smash play for him. Kamara is averaging 25 carries a game in his last 2 after 28 total carries in his first 2 games. It's inevitable that he finds the end zone again this week, and he should make it 3 straight games with 100 total yards of offense. We have Ezekiel Elliott at number 3, and he gets the New York Giants at home. At this point, let's just let Zeke continue to eat. In his last 3 games, he has 3 top 11 finishes. He's averaging 103 yards, and he has 4 touchdowns in that span. He keeps it rolling this week at home. At 4, it's Nick Chubb, and he gets an excellent Swiss cheese defense to face in the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, in his last 2 games, Chubb has 43 carries, getting that workhorse role, although he hasn't scored a touchdown after he had 3 touchdowns in his first 2 games. I expect that to change, and I think that he gets in at least once. Finally, looking like his former self, Saquon Barkley rounds out our top 5. Now, obviously, he had a slow start coming back from injury, but he has since had back-to-back top 10 finishes. This is a tough matchup against the Cowboys, who are allowing just 81 rushing yards a game, which is 6th best in the NFL. Now, thankfully, Saquon has been able to make it work through the air with 13 targets and 117 receiving yards in his last 2 games. We have Aaron Jones next at number 6, and he gets a top 10 defense against the run in Cincinnati. The Bengals have allowed a rushing touchdown a week on average, so there's a little bit of hope there. Since week 1, Aaron Jones is averaging 17 carries and 4 targets a game, and it is that elite usage that will allow him to once again produce a solid stat line. Dalvin Cook is here at number 7, and if he's healthy, he is going to absolutely crush the Lions. But the reason he's at 7 and not in the top 3 is that is a big if. He was seen limping late in the 3rd quarter last week, and he may not be 100%. That was a top 7 Cleveland rushing defense that he faced last week. This is obviously a much better matchup, but last week he had just 34 yards on 9 carries. So even though he was playing and back, he wasn't his former self. Now, we have to keep an eye on this situation, because if he does end up sitting, Alexander Mattison slides in and immediately becomes a high-end RB2 with some upside. In at number 8, it is Darrell Henderson Jr. He goes on the road Thursday night to face the Seahawks. Welcome to the top 10, Mr. Henderson. Please don't make me look silly. Now, from the looks of it, Seattle's defense couldn't stop my grandfather for running for a 30-yard gain. They are dead last in the NFL, giving up over 150 rushing yards per game. I am betting on the guy who just ran for 6.3 yards per carry and saw 20 opportunities last week. After back-to-back 20-point games, in at number 9 is James Robinson. He gets Tennessee this week, which is a great matchup, and we're seeing those points and production due to his increase in workload. He's seen 33 carries in his last 2 games after seeing just 16 in his first 2. He is going to make it 3 in a row, top 10 finishes this week against the Titans. The last spot here in our top 10 goes to a guy that I was promoting, buying heavily in our buy-sell video yesterday, and that's going to be Jonathan Taylor, who goes on the road to face the Ravens. Now, in his 2 games that he's seen over 16 touches, Jonathan Taylor has produced 159 rushing yards, 71 receiving yards, and a touchdown. And I think he's going to be heavily utilized in this game, as the Colts are going to need to try to maintain the possession and give their defense a rest against that bruising running game of Baltimore. Now, the Ravens do have a top 7 defense, but they've allowed 5 touchdowns rushing so far, which is tied for 8th most in the NFL. Austin, pound for pound, Eckler is in at number 11, and he faces a Cleveland Browns defense that just smothered Dalvin Cook last week. Now, Eckler's coming off of a RB3 performance where he had 145 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Raiders. It's going to be difficult for an encore against this top 3 rushing defense. Although I think the usage through the air for Eckler will certainly keep him and allow him to finish as an RB1 for the 4th straight week. Rounding out our running back ones for week 5 is Najee Harris, who has a really tough matchup against the Denver Broncos. He is also in line for his 4th straight RB1 finish, and I think that although it's going to be difficult for him because of the top 5 rushing defense in Denver, he's been able to still rack up 100 yards of total offense due to, once again, that passing usage. That is going to continue as Big Ben can't throw it more than 6 yards downfield anyway. At lucky number 13, it's DeAndre Swift, and in order, he has RB finishes of 4, 21, 5, and then 37 last week. So it stands to reason that he's going to finish top 5 again this week. Now, the matchup with Minnesota would certainly agree, as the Vikings are allowing 135 yards rushing per game. However, his usage just does not. Swift has seen 12 touches in 2 out of his last 3 games, and that is what keeps him from an RB1 ranking. Jamal Williams also continues to eat into his workload and actually saw more carries than Swift did last week. He has lots of upside if he can see closer to that 20 touches a game that he was seeing when he was finishing top 5. At 14, it is Kareem Hunt in that matchup against the Chargers. He comes in as RB8 on the year and has 3 finishes inside the top 17. He also saw a season high 14 carries against the Vikings, and we love the player, we love the matchup, and we love that he's going to make it 4 straight weeks as a high-end RB2. At 15, it's Antonio Gibson, who comes in with 360 yards of total offense and a score in each of the last 2 games. Now, the Saints are number 2 against the run, and they allow only 66 yards rushing a game, so you don't love that. But I think the talent here is enough to rank him as a high RB2. There is certainly risk, especially with J.D. McKissic, who is eating into that workload, but I still love him enough to rank him there. Coming in with 100 yards rushing or more in back-to-back games is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, he's certainly made the most of his back-to-back cakewalk matchups against the Chargers and Philadelphia. However, the matchup this week with the Bills is a different story. They are allowing the fourth fewest yards and have allowed only one rushing touchdown all season. It is this week that CEH needs to prove it, and I think that he does just enough in a game where lots of points are going to be scored. We have Leonard Fournette making himself known at number 17, and I am on Fournette after seeing him Sunday night absolutely thrash the Patriots. If he continues to see the 20 carries that he saw against them, he will be a staple in the RB2 range moving forward. This matchup against Miami is awesome as they allow 136 yards a game, and Fournette's receiving work only boosts his upside. Our 18th player is Damian, welcome back from obscurity, Harris. Now he gets a great matchup in Houston this week, although he certainly burned us the last 2 weeks. This is all about the matchup and the predicted game flow. The Texans surrender 137 yards on the ground a game and most likely are going to be behind early. So that's going to leave plenty of touches for Harris to be able to take advantage of. Harris has a real chance to boom after running 10 times for 10 yards over his last 2 games. And no, that is a real stat. I didn't get that wrong. We have Damian Williams in at number 19, and he gets a great matchup on the road against the Raiders. With David Montgomery potentially missing 4 to 5 weeks, I think Williams slides in and should see a very similar workload to the one that we saw Montgomery getting, because there are no other backs of note on this roster. Raiders are bottom 10 in yards allowed on the ground and have surrendered 6 rushing scores. I like him even more after the announcement earlier this morning that Justin Fields is going to be the new starter in Chicago. I think Williams falls into the end zone against the Raiders and should produce a great stat line. The final player in our top 20 is Chuba Hubbard, and while he didn't produce quite to the level that we were hoping he would, especially after Carolina fell behind and you would hope that he would have seen more targets in the passing game, he still did see 15 touches. This is an excellent matchup. The Eagles are allowing 28.5 points per game to backs, and Hubbard comes in averaging 4.5 yards a tote. So with his volume and this matchup, that makes him a solid RB2. A guy we might be a little high on, but I just project his volume to be fairly decent this week. And in at number 21 is Josh Jacobs. He had an absolutely killer matchup against the Chargers last week, and he turned that into 3 yards a carry. So he did have 5 targets, which we love to see and certainly boosts his upside and keeps him in that RB2 conversation. But that's certainly just for now, and he's going to have to prove it in a game against the Bears where the matchup is much harder. The 22nd player on our list is Chase Edmonds, and he comes in hot, averaging nearly 100 yards of total offense in Arizona's seemingly unstoppable offensive attack. Now, 3 of those 4 games were plus matchups. However, San Francisco is allowing 118 yards and has allowed 5 touchdowns so far this season. So that opportunity for him to continue and remain a top 24 back, which he's done all year, is going to be in play. After finding himself in the mid to upper tier RB2 range nearly the entire season, Chris Carson finds himself all the way down at 23, and this is due to a couple things. First and foremost, we don't know what's going on with his neck injury. He didn't practice on Tuesday, and with a short week playing on a Thursday, that is a major concern. The other thing is he just didn't look that good last week. He had 14 touches and totaled 31 yards. Alex Collins looked much better in relief, and he would slide in here if Carson had to sit. However, I just don't trust that situation enough to feel comfortable playing Collins should Carson sit. The last of our RB2s in here at number 24 is Cordarrelle Patterson, who comes in as the RB3 on the season. Now this is an absolutely fantastic matchup against the Jets, who have given up the most points per game to running backs. Now he is all the way down here because the volume that Patterson has seen is fairly low. He's seeing about 11 touches a game, and even in that limited workload, I like him. Now, he's gonna have to produce more of those flash plays for him to hit here, but I think he has a chance to make it 4 straight weeks with a top 20 finish. At 25, we have Latavius Murray, and I am aggressively ranking him because the Ravens are aggressively using him. He had 18 touches last week, and he scored in 3 out of his 4 games for the top rushing offense in the entire NFL. I understand the concerns. The Colts are a top 7 rushing defense, but Murray is the clear RB1 in a team that wants to pound it, and I think he's a high-end flex with some upside. Jamal Williams gets a Minnesota Vikings defense that is allowing over 25 points a game to running backs and finds himself here at number 26. Williams actually outtouched Swift last week, and while I don't expect that to continue, it is a situation that we need to continue to monitor. He has 280 yards and 2 touchdowns so far this season and is the current RB19. Our 27th player is Miles Sanders against Carolina, who has a top 3 defense against running backs. Now the negatives. Sanders has seen just 9 carries in the last 2 weeks. However, he does have 62 yards receiving during that span, which is keeping him at least partially relevant. This is a huge week for him as the rookie Kenneth Gainwell starts to gain steam, and I think he responds in a way that allows him to have high-end flex appeal. It's a bit of a cluster still in the 49ers backfield and probably will be all season, so at 28 I threw both Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon against the Cardinals here. Reports right now seem to think that this is Mitchell's job if and when he is healthy, so we're leaning towards him. However, Sermon produced nearly 90 yards last week and is going to be competing for touches. Points should be scored aplenty in this game, so whichever back ends up starting is going to be a solid option. Our number 29 player on the week is Zach Moss, who is the current RB27. Now he has 2 top 15 finishes in his last 3 weeks. He's averaging 15 touches in those last 2 games, and this is a great matchup against the Chiefs defense that is allowing 29 points a game to running backs. He is a flex with some upside. Our 30th player is a projection that Joe Mixon misses this week, and that's going to be Samaje Perine. Now he gets a Green Bay defense that is just all right against the run. You don't hate the matchup, you don't love it. But if Mixon ends up sitting, Perine is going to have every opportunity to produce and should see the lion's share of the carries. I would temper expectations as I think the Bengals are going to go to the air more so than not. And if Mixon does end up playing, he is going to be a mid-tier RB2 for us. At 31, once again jumbling together a couple players, and it is that Denver Broncos backfield. We're talking Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon III. This is a tough matchup for both of these backs, and they have been splitting touches all season, so we split them here in the rankings. Now the Steelers are allowing under 16 points a game, so there's certainly risk in starting either of these guys, especially with Teddy Bridgewater out. I think with starting Drew Lock, the Broncos are going to lean more on that running game, and I would lean towards Melvin Gordon here because he has 335 yards so far this season to just 234 for Williams. Our 32nd player is Tony Pollard against those Giants. Now he continues to produce even with his limited workload and is averaging a staggering 6.75 yards per carry. The Giants are a bottom 10 defense against the run, allowing running backs to score over 26 points per game. He is an upside flex with some boom potential in week 5. Our 33rd player is Mike Davis, who will most likely finish with double-digit points for the 5th straight game due to his volume. Now we know his upside is being sapped away by Cordero Patterson. However, the Jets are allowing over 33 points a game to running backs, so he's gonna get his. At 34 is another player stuck in a timeshare. This is Devin Singletary, and he gets the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, he has just one finish in the top 12 so far this season. However, he's averaging 13.5 touches in his last 2 games. We love his 5.3 yards per carry, but he needs to see some more work in the passing game to move up any higher in our rankings. This is a great matchup, but splitting time with Zach Moss certainly limits his upside. Our 35th player is A.J. Dillon, fresh off of a 15-carry, 81-yard performance. Those 15 carries last week matched his total for the first 3 games he played this season, so this is a situation we need to keep a close eye on. The Bengals allow more than 23 points a game to running backs, so we love that. Michael Carter sees a great matchup this week and sees himself here at 36. Now, he had a great matchup last week and wasn't really able to do anything with it against the Titans. He had just 38 yards on 13 carries. So if the matchup isn't good enough, then something else has to change. Carter is averaging just 3.4 yards per carry on the season, but there is certainly upside in this start with some risk. James Conner is here at 37, and he has back-to-back games scoring 2 touchdowns in each of them. The 49ers are the matchup and allow 27 points per game to running backs. If Conner is able to see the 13 carries he's been averaging, he'll be able to produce enough to be a decent flex option. But he's also averaging just 3.2 yards per carry, so his floor is fairly low. The final player that we're going to cover in depth is Kenneth Gainwell here at number 38. Now, Gainwell is averaging over 4 targets a game. He has 90 yards receiving in his last 2, so that gives him a decent floor. We've said earlier in the video, talking about Miles Sanders, that he is coming on hot and potentially pushing for more work in this offense, so he could produce a decent day even in a tough matchup. A few notable omissions for week 5 start with Myles Gaskin and Malcolm Brown against Tampa Bay because nobody runs on them. We also have Nyheim Hines against Baltimore. Now, Hines is averaging just 6 touches a game in his last 3. That volume is not enough for me. Finally, we have Mark Ingram, the second, against New England. And this is pretty simple. You can't trust anyone in Houston whose name isn't Brandon Cooks. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, please drop those down below. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abraham Opatz. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done it yet, and we'll see you next time.